Welcome to this video lecture for Understanding Project Management, a Practical Guide, 2nd edition, Chapter 12, Managing Disruptions to the Plan, Issues in Change. Okay, let's look to see where we are in the project lifecycle. So we are in the executing phase, and we're now going to look at things that happen during a project, and primarily within the executing phase, which are things referred to as issues and change, disruptions to that which we previously planned. Our agenda are these two areas as managing project issues and managing project change. So let's look at the overall area, the overall topic of managing disruptions. In a perfect world, the project would unfold exactly as planned. Whatever we put into the plan would unfold and would happen during the executing phase. Well, unfortunately, the world doesn't work that way. It isn't perfect, and things happen which disrupt our plan. So instead, there are unexpected problems or issues that inevitably occur during the execution of a project. Virtually any project that is of a certain size and complexity will have things that go wrong or is not as expected or come up, and those are things that we need to respond to. There are also usually requests for change or changes to be made to the previously agreed upon project plans. It is very normal that stakeholders of the projects, they change their mind. Something new becomes available in the market or in their environment. And so the thing that we agreed upon previously in the plan, there's now a desire for changes to this. And so this is where we need to manage. And so in order to successfully complete a manage, both issues and changes need to be effectively managed. And notice the word managed. This is a key to this topic, is that we are not passively letting these things happen and just seeing what the effect of it is. We are actively attempting to manage both issues and change within our project. So that's a key idea. So in terms of issues, the first step is to identify and document issues. So we need to write them down. Now, before we do that, let's just step back for a moment and say, well, what makes something an issue? What is it that makes it that? And from the textbook, the definition is that an issue is something that if you do not resolve it, so if unresolved, will affect the performance, the results of the project. So it isn't just anything that happens during the project. It's just not something, day to day, there's certain conditions happen. They're the things that if you don't do something about it, it will affect the performance of the project. And so that's what makes something an issue. Project issues should be documented in a document called an issue log. An issue log is a formal document. You can see the issue log template in the textbook in chapter 12, and it's important to use it. Now, those that are new to project management often struggle with this concept. The idea is, well, why don't we just solve them as they come up? Why don't we just, instead of writing, we'll just fix them right away? Well, that's true if there's only one or two a day, or if they're very infrequent. That's possible, but on large and complex projects, oftentimes the issues occur faster than they can be resolved. They'll start to pile up. And so it's important to not forget about them and to store them somewhere. And that's where an issue log comes into play. Now, in terms of our next step is to manage the project issues. And part of that is prioritizing them, is that once we have it in an issue log, they may be sorted or filtered. For example, the issue log may be sorted by priority, having the high priority ones sorted to the top of the issue log. They may be filtered to show a selected status. We might want to see all the issues that were resolved during that past period of time for a status report that we're producing, and for various reasons. So why would it be important to sort or filter the issue log? Well, there's various reasons, but it's key when we are resolving issues. It makes sense to resolve the highest priority ones first. We want to solve those issues that will impact the project the most before we do the ones that have a lesser impact. That just makes sense. We also need to understand our issues and so on. That's where filtering comes in. So it's important to be able to do so. Now, in terms of resolving issues, a problem-solving approach should be used. Now, certainly for very simple issues, trivial issues, these can be resolved intuitively. They don't need a formal approach. But for issues of a certain size and complexity, something more structured is advisable. The steps in the problem-solving approach for this textbook and this lecture is as follows. First, fully describe the issue, fully understand what the issue is, and by describing it, there is an increase of understanding. Who's involved? What's the impact? When does it occur? What conditions cause it to occur? Everything we know about it is documented. Now, next is develop alternative solutions. Now, in some issues, particularly simple ones, often the solution is obvious. It's an obvious issue, and then we do this. But in more complex issues, there are often more than one solution. There are alternative solutions that are required or that are possible. And so this is the point where we document those alternative solutions. The next step is to select the optimal solution. So and again, it depends on the project as to what the optimal solution is. It isn't always the most expensive long-term solution. There are times when interim solutions make sense. So it's optimal for that part of the project. And then finally, the last step is to implement the selected solution. So of the one that was identified as optimal is to implement the one that was selected, is to do it. And that's the 4-step process. Now, for some issues, as mentioned, is often an informal process. That was mentioned. In some instances as well, or in other cases, creating decision criteria and weighted averages may be appropriate. And this is something that is done infrequently, but it is something that can be done. For example, here's a case where we have two alternatives, and instead of informally describing the different aspects of each alternative, is that we formally score them based on cost. In this case, this is just an example. It doesn't mean you always do it this way, but in this case, we have broken it down to say cost, time, and effectiveness are our 3 criteria, and we have weighted them by percentage. That cost is 20%, time is 30%, and effectiveness of the solution is 50%. So effectiveness has the highest weight. And then we score them and weight the scores. We apply those percentages of that. And so in this alternative 1 has a score of 1 plus 1.8 plus 4.5 is a 7.3. versus alternative 2 results in a 5.9. And you can see the math that's happening there of adding up the weighted scores. So in this case, alternative 1 has a higher weighted score. Okay, so in that case, the 7.3 alternative 1 would be our selected alternative, or that's what this weighted average points us towards. So the question becomes, when would weighted averages, when would this approach be used, right? So when would we do this? Well, certainly not for small problems, for trivial problems, or even medium size. This is the one that for the very big issues that you would use something like this. Okay, so for resolving issues, let's now go to our case study video, and we will watch this together of the approach used on the case study to resolving issues. So let's watch this. They start as a trickle, become a steady stream, and turn into a tsunami. Problems. To Sophie, it seemed like every day there was something new going wrong. The problems were coming from all angles. The execution of the project has just started, and already the following problems have occurred. The Deco Productions company logo on the trade show banner is too small. The trade show banner stand is not available. The price of the giveaways, that is the postcards, is 40% more than budgeted. The demo version from the development project team is late. These are usually sent as part of the media outreach. The first version of the multimedia demo isn't working as planned. The user experience is not very effective. The main actor signed for the promotional video was diagnosed with pneumonia and may need to be replaced. During past projects, Sophie tried to solve each problem as they appeared. While this worked for small projects early in her career, on larger projects she became overwhelmed with issues and couldn't solve them as they arose. She would start to lose track of the status of the problem, which further compounded the issue. Now this seems to be happening again on this project. Luckily, Sophie has developed a process that helps her manage the torrent of problems that often occur. As each issue is identified, she records the key information in an issue log that she keeps in a spreadsheet on her laptop before she tries to solve it. This has really helped her to keep track of each issue and to prioritize them so that she and the team are working on the most important issues first. For small, frequent issues, Sophie has learned to trust her instinct. With the knowledge gained during the planning of the project, along with past experience, she's found that she's able to solve most problems quickly and effectively. For larger issues, she uses a formal method of determining the alternatives and then selecting the optimal solution. Sophie has found that problems and issues can be very disruptive to the project team. Some team members assume the worst and develop a negative outlook for the project, which can affect the morale of the entire team. To minimize this, Sophie encourages each team member to follow the problem-solving process. Taking a systematic approach to resolving issues tends to reduce the negative emotions by focusing the team on alternatives and solutions. Okay, so we saw the approach to resolving issues, the identifying and resolving issues. As was mentioned in the video, issues may be resolved either formally with a structured problem-solving approach for large significant issues, or informally for smaller issues. You don't have to use the four-step process for every little thing that comes in, and that's the judgment of the project manager and team members. The issue log should be continually updated as issues are resolved and as new issues arise. It's something that should be maintained throughout. So again, see the issue log for the case study in the textbook in chapter 12. Okay, on to the next the next part, managing project change. So project changes are different from project issues. Sometimes the language interchanges on these. The issues and changes are sort of commingled in terms of how they're described, but technically project changes are different because changes are something that may be done. They are requests versus issues are things that happen. Changes are requested or initiated. The challenge is to develop an approach to considering possible changes and determining those that should be made and those that should not be made. It isn't normally the case that you respond and implement all change requests, nor do you stop any change from being made. So it's determining which changes should be done and which shouldn't be done. And this approach is called a change control process. So for changes submitted, identified during a project, the following steps should be performed. One, a change request is submitted. You can see an example of the change request template in the textbook, chapter 12. Next, the project team will assess the impact of the requested change. So based on the description of the change that was included in that change request, the team will update the form to say, well, this is the impact. This is potential costs, potential delays to the project. There could be quality issues. There could be additional risks that were going to be taken on. Could cause some additional work. We might need to hire more resources and so on. So there's all kinds of possible impacts. The change request is then either approved or rejected. So there is now a process where they are reviewed and approved or rejected. If approved, the appropriate planning documents are updated, which is important. We need to keep our plans up to date, and the change is carried out as appropriate. Okay, so let's now move to our next video, and we will see the process of managing change within our project. Just as Sophie arrives in the morning, Chris Sandberg, the graphic designer assigned to the project, walks into her office. He begins talking excitedly about a great idea that came to him on the way to work. Instead of producing postcards for the trade show giveaways, why don't we change them to look like picture frames? This will support the idea that DecoCam can do more than make a postcard. Even though the timing is very tight to make this change, Sophie asks Chris to fill out a change request so that the idea will be considered as soon as possible. That afternoon, Sophie checks her email inbox and notices that she has received another request for a possible change. In the email, the project manager of the DecoCam version 4 development project indicates that a special version of the DecoCam software could be created and used in the multimedia demo, providing a superior experience for the trade show participants. In her reply, Sophie thanks the project manager for sending the idea and asks her to complete a change request. Both requests are received later that day. Due to the tight timing, Sophie meets with her team members immediately in order to develop accurate estimates of the potential impact of making each change. The next day, the Project Change Committee has its weekly meeting. The members of the committee are Sophie Featherstone, the project manager, Arun Singh, the project sponsor, and Fatijit Kumar, the business analyst. The committee reviews both change requests and discusses the pros and cons of each at length. The postcard picture frame change request is approved as the committee feels that the benefit is significant for a relatively modest cost. While they are tempted by the benefits of the multimedia request, they feel that the cost and the risk of errors occurring at the trade show are just not worth it. Therefore, this request is not approved. After the meeting, Sophie checks her notes and makes the appropriate changes to the project plans. The project scope statement is updated to reflect the change in scope, and the project budget is updated to reflect the change in the project cost. The project schedule is not affected. Okay, so we saw again the change process, our approach to managing project change outlined in that video. So for each, and just to review the process, for each potential change to the project, a change request form is completed. And an example of a change request form is included in the textbook. Each change request is reviewed by the project change committee and either approved or rejected. Now, the formality, the approach to reviewing and managing the change requests may vary by organizations, but it's not uncommon to have some kind of a group that would include perhaps members from the project team, the project manager, or analysts and so on, the project sponsor, or even other stakeholders within the organization that review changes on a periodic basis and either approve or reject the changes. So that is a common process. So key idea, resolve project change requests by using a change control process. Key terminology that was introduced during this video lecture, which you can see there, and see the key terminology section in chapter 12 for a complete list of terms and definitions. The references for the images used in this presentation, and that is the end of this topic.